The fundamentals of communication don't change. The fundamentals of human nature don't change. Sometimes I think it's not difficult to succeed in the real world if you run towards the real world and test yourself out. You'll get better. Can you actually demonstrate personality at a high level in public life and get away with it? Or do you need to be managerial and robotic? Right, it's about turning theory into practice. That's the bit that makes me want to come into work every day.
Charles Vallance, welcome to the Lifecraft Conversations.
We go back decades, don't we?
We do, yes.
First, truly decades. I met you at BBH, I think. It was either BBH or WCRS. Which came first?
Probably WCRS, actually.
Was it? Yeah. I remember us. Did you have a black BMW?
And a dark green BMW.
And we went once to. I think the first job I ever did with you was to Sony. Did you do Sony?
Yes.
And there was that really scary woman.
Oh, Brenda.
Yeah, Brenda.
Yeah, that was BBH, actually. Yeah.
And Brenda. See, I always get Brenda Dean, I think, and I always get her muddled up with the...
Brenda Jones.
You see, I get her muddled up with the head of the print union, Sogat, because she was just the same. She was really scary.
Yeah.
She used to shout at people.
Yeah. She did. Good old Brenda.
I wonder if she's still with us.
I should think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was... she was a force of nature. I remember there's her and Jeff Muge, I remember, from those days at Sony, and Staines.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. I sat in the back of your BMW, and there was some other planner, and I don't know who he was. I think he was
Tim Hollins?
Oh, I don't know, but I think he was senior. It must have been senior.
Yeah, it would have been senior.
Yeah, man.
Young men in those days.
Yeah, and we shot off.
Yeah.
I don't know why I was there. I don't know why I was like tagging along.
Maybe just there by accident. It's got in the wrong BMW. Yeah. It was a nice way to meet you.
And then, but I don't think that was your first place, was it? I think you'd come from somewhere.
I was Burkitt's.
Right.
Which was, I was working on Scottish and Newcastle breweries and a little bit of what was then International Distillers, and Vintners became Diageo, and other bits and pieces. Including Mazda and All Nippon Airlines. Then I moved to BBH, working on various things, including Sony, Allied Dunbar, Alfred Dunhill, Luxury Goods, and then BBH. No, then WCRS.
WCRS,
Orange,
with Robin.
Yeah, with Robin, yeah. And then, again, beer, worked on Sega, all sorts of things.
But that was John Hegarty and Nigel Bogle, wasn't it? Were you?
That was BBH.
Yeah. I'm just trying to piece to. Was that 1980? So
BBH was late 80s, early 90s, to about 93, and then WCRS was 93, 94 to 2001. VCCP was 2002. The
good old days,
yes.
when the streets were paved with creative gold.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I think that sort of creatively things are more creative now. It's just more prolific. It was a very, very constipated creative process back in the day. It always used to frustrate me. And you did do some great work, but it was kind of despite the conditions you'd created for yourselves. Whereas now it's much more unlocked and unruly and liberated creative process.
Reading all your articles, you're very optimistic and positive about what some people might argue is an industry that's fading somewhat.
I think I am an optimist. I'm not sort of mindlessly optimistic. I don't think a lot of my friends wouldn't even describe me as an optimist. But I think fundamentally, I think things are capable of getting better rather than worse. all things being equal. But it's how you define the business, but I see communications as a fast-growing, exciting industry to be in. If you want to define advertising as what we were doing in the 90s, then obviously that is shrinking. But communications is growing. It's growing in terms of importance, it's growing in terms of scale, and it's growing in terms of creativity. It's kind of, it's a field day for good communicators. Not that there are many around, but it's a real, I think there's a huge amount of upside.
Are you an evangelist for AI or against it, or where do you sit with that?
I think it is very profound. I think it's actually going to have more impact than the smartphone, which had a huge impact. And in particular, generative AI is really, it's quite extraordinary, the impact it's already having. But it's a bit like lamenting the advent of the smartphone or television. Why lament it? I'm not saying I'm an out-and-out advocate for it. It's clearly got upsides and downsides. But you have to embrace it. With those qualifications, you have to embrace it and run towards it. Even if it was a terrible thing, you should still run towards it and embrace it on the basis of keep your enemies close. But I don't think it is a terrible thing, and it changes, whatever it is, Il Capitado or whatever it was. Who wrote that book?
I don't know.
I'll come back to me. But basically the leopard that Fellini shot, which is essentially a story of Sicilian stasis, and the aristocrat famously says everything must change so everything can stay the same.
Yeah, of course, yes.
And that's what happens in life. The fundamentals of communication don't change. The fundamentals of human nature don't change. And you can have all the rest of it is sort of window dressing.
You're from Yorkshire.
Yes, very much so, yeah.
A lot of people don't know that, You don't.
Yeah, they do if they know me, because I go on about it a lot. But.
I used to go with my mum to Vallance's, and it was years later, decades later, when I realised it was your shop.
Yeah, my father and my uncles, yes, they set up, with my grandfather got it going, selling wirelesses and then gramophones in Knaresborough. But they really expanded it and built it and developed it into what you would have seen and what prospered until the mid-80s, actually. Before
Amazon, obviously, used to go there for nuts and bolts and things.
And big business nuts and bolts.
Yeah, people don't know how to do that stuff now.
No,
people don't know how to. I think that when you recruit people, you have these recruitment days.
Yes.
I think you should put a plug on the table, and as the team, you do these tasks, challenges. Yeah. You should say, right, team, rewire the plug, and see who knows what to do.
Yeah.
And I don't
scramble some eggs as well, maybe. Well, I used to put a lot of plugs on TVs because they didn't come with plugs in those days. So one of my holiday jobs would be sit in the storeroom putting plugs on. So I'd pass your test very well, actually. Because Vallance is always, every television came with a plug. You didn't have to pay extra for it.
That was years ahead of its time. That is so far ahead of its time.
Because now they do actually come with the plugs, yeah. But we saw that coming.
Yeah, you're not allowed to take the plug off now, are you?
No.
Because that's against health and safety.
No, they're all sort of welded on. We definitely professionalise our county more than most, definitely. So we adopt if you like, the cliches or the persona more than most, largely because very few have a clearly defined persona versus I suppose Geordies, Scousers, Yorkies. There's not many, but they're all northern, and I think it's that really that you're channeling. Is not southeast, not establishment, not, if you like, the entitled elite, and that's quite an interesting aspect of being not from the southeast and not from a southeast educational background. not going to Oxford or Cambridge, always being sort of one step removed from what appears to be a little bit of a cartel of ideas that, of course, now are beginning to look rather threadbare and potentially didn't have enough Yorkshire grit thrown at them. And it's a bit easier to do that when you're northern for some reason. You're less bought into the claptrap.
That's interesting. Do you think that? Yeah,
I think generally planners and change makers step out are outsiders to some extent, and it's because you see things much more clearly, don't you, from the outside than the inside. In fact, it's virtually impossible to see things clearly from the inside. And there's very few, and also you're part of fewer clubs, literally and metaphorically. So you're making your own decisions and judgments more. And even if you are inside all the clubs and all the sort of special interest groups, you shouldn't act like you are. You shouldn't think like you are. You should think independently. But it's very difficult to think independently. But as an outsider, some things are much less of a surprise than they would be to insiders. As well. I did a holiday job in one of the shops, the shop in Castleford, when we had to do, when it's the middle of the miners'
That's
strike.
hardcore. That's really hardcore.
Yeah.
Literally as well.
Yeah, it is. But it was very interesting because they couldn't pay the TV in those days. No one had a TV; they rented it. And so I remember being involved, not in a managerial way, but helping work out how we were going to negotiate, not reclaiming the television, and just putting it off. And these very big burly blokes actually seemed perfectly reasonable to me.
I think it's Yvette Cooper's constituency, isn't it?
I think it is. Yeah. It wasn't in those days. I this comes back to my general view that you shouldn't be making judgments, and no one should be seen as higher or lower, or ideas superior or inferior. If you treat everyone at face, I'm now signing it. Trust what sort of gullible, but it's very surprising. I mean, how you can just generally people will take you as you are, and I mean I don't just mean up in the north, but generally.
If they do, that's very refreshing. I mean, that's you would hope.
I think the thing is you can give off a signal if you want that you're diagnosing them, or you slightly disapprove of them. Because
I've seen you do that actually.
No, I don't.
You do disapproval very well.
Well, if I want to display disapproval, I will. But as a general rule, I don't. I don't go. I mean, I always think, just live and let live. The number of things you could take offence. I mean, I have this thing of walking down a pavement. The number of times I feel I have to get out of the way. It doesn't bother me at all. In fact, I count my steps, so it helps. But I'm thinking, I wonder what would happen if I did just keep straight on course, and I might just be in my imagination, but I feel generally why cause any aggro?
Yes,
and because you will have time when you're going to have a run in. As you say, there will be times when I disapprove of something at work or want to do something better or start again. So reserve your energy for those moments.
Yeah.
My note of hesitation, I've never had since the BMW, which was a nice BMW. It's a 3 Series, and I had a 5 Series. That's about where I peaked in the car hierarchy, and I've always wanted to go one up into a sort of comedy, saloony, slouchy, sort of semi-limo. I don't mind if it's a Jag, even maybe a Merc. And I've sort of looked at those, because I think with Bentleys and Rolls Royces, after about 4 years, they just depreciate like that.
Yeah.
But only because just one or two touring things, you'd feel very fancy pants, and also I bet they are nice to drive. I bet they on an auto route in France. I bet it is quite quite something. And but no, it's not a goer.
I remember you telling me, this is going back about 10 years, I suspect, that you were having a little sniff around a Rolls Royce. Is it the Wraith?
The Wraith
with the backward open.
Oh, I love
suicide
that.
doors.
No, that's exactly. I saw one in the flesh somewhere in London, and the doors were one door was being opened, and it is like a Riva Aquarama on wheels, and yeah, and I thought this is a beautiful thing, and maybe the thing to do is just to hire one for a week and do the drive down to France and back, and then hand it back.
Possibly, but you really kind of need it to. I always think with those sort of cars, you need a chauffeur, don't you? Really, you can't drive it yourself.
I don't want to correct you, but I think the Wraith is a driver's car. I don't know. It's not one of the massive. I mean, it's massive.
You haven't got the account, have you?
No. I happened to. It was one of those. I noticed. I particularly noticed it, and I remember mentioning it. Can you actually demonstrate personality at a high level in public life and get away with it? Or do you need to be managerial and robotic? Is potentially the question. Because if you go back, and it was more than 10 years, so I'd say it started in 80. So advertising and communication being that prominent started with Maurice and Charles and Tim.
Yes.
And Martin, although he was finance director at Sarches, wasn't he? And it may have been recognised as a thing in going, oh, well, yeah, and John Webster. And so there were these very big personalities, but Maurice and Charles turbocharged it because they became public figures, politically, commercially, beyond the ad village. And then Charles went into art and Maurice went into politics, etc., etc. And they also, it was a purple patch advertising. There was Hegarty, there was Bogle, Bartle,
Frank Lowe,
Webster, Sorrell, Lowe. There definitely was. There were more prominent people who were more prominent, wearing bow ties, big glasses. Generally being much more public and more celebrated. And on top of that, I think there were more conspicuous, this is a bit later on, this is more 90s, but there was that sudden phase of British brand building from EasyJet and commercial flowering that involves some strong brands. First Direct, Pret a Manger, EasyJet, Dyson, Orange. They all happened. Yeah. Just as Blair was coming into power, and then it was Britpop, and then it was Modern British Artists, and that kept the boat, the tyres pumped up as those guys got a bit older, and we washed up into the 21st century. Where at which stage they had taken a back step. They're still practitioners, but less prominent, apart from Sol. And then the new wave took over, VCCP and CHI and Mother a little bit ahead of before us, but not a dissimilar vintage, and a number that have come and gone. BT McGuinness, I think they're now slightly different. BMB, I think they're called. And CDD, there and Adam and Eve, who grew and then got brought into what was then BMP, and turned that around, and they now started again. But that era, and it was a greyer corporate world that we were into. I mean, it was much more risk averse by this stage. So business characters were fewer and further between.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The rise of the CFO as chief exec was well underway. Whereas the CMO used to stand pretty much an equal chance. I might be exaggerating, but There were plenty of CMO becoming CEO, but that's very rare now. And yeah, it became more managerial and more technocratic. Life in general, I'd say.
Yeah.
And I think the industry slightly matched that risk aversion. You have to, when it comes to brave or challenging ideas, you have to pick your client, and it often takes a lot of persuasion to get cut through ideas accepted.
But you're one of the few remaining eponymous agencies, because everybody now is named after, like,
No, they are.
an animal or some.
Yeah. They've got very different names. They're either sort of NCA, New Commercial Arts, or the And Partnership, or Mother, or Cake, or Glue, or I think they're from an era that's gone by. There's a new one that started up, which name escapes me. The Corner. Yes, we moved from eponymous to brand names. That's definitely the case. I can't think of any immediate rivals to us who trade under their names.
And I would say that you are one of the remaining names that is around and about and relatively well known. I mean, possibly not as well known as Versace's or anything.
No, not remotely. Not remotely well known outside of the immediate industry, and then probably not that well known inside the industry. But we played it that way. I laugh because the people get really annoyed if someone takes their limelight. And
what do you mean, generally, or in the industry?
Well, in the industry, but I think in general, I think it's a human truth. Okay. You're like, how dare they? and I'd often go when someone was promoting themselves off the work we produce. I'd say to the people, you go and do the fucking, get yourself into these fucking magazines and newspapers if you want. At least he or she's got the gum. And the fact of the matter is, you've got to work at your own publicity. And as an agency, we chose more to work on our work, which would become our publicity, which is a slow and laborious way round, but it's sort of paid off. And 23 years in, the name of the company is better known, and the individuals are not by any means just me or Adrian, but Michael and Steph and Baron and Chris and John. They're better known, but they're not by any means well known.
No.
The advantage of having a founder-led business is you can say, well, we represent a point of view, a worldview embodied in these individuals that set up the business. This is the nature of the company they wanted to create, which we do. I mean, I always, this is my prop that I always have because I take notes the whole time, but we have 10 founding principles, as you're probably aware.
Yes.
And they were designed by the four of us to prevent us lurching back into the bad habits of an industry that was far too snobbish and bureaucratic and factionalized and fragmented and complex, to keep it very simple, very collaborative, very open, very free-form, very unhierarchical. And that's how we like to work. And that's, and it probably helps that you have the founders who can reiterate that and hopefully set an example along those lines as well.
Yeah. Did you ever think about changing it?
Well, the interesting thing is, neither Adrian or I are wedded to keeping VCCP because we realise we're not immortal. So at a given point, I think they will just be initials. And when we had this bit of the identity developed, which is about 15 years ago now, to symbolise the idea of a challenger brand. So we're the little girl on the right and the bear's the bear. We talked about what about calling ourselves Girl and Bear, for instance? And other thoughts along that, because
you have got a sub-agency.
well, yeah, we'll come on. Yeah. So, but what interestingly, the people who were most opposed weren't us. There was some really vocal opposition to the idea from some clients and a lot of people in the agency. They work for VCCP, as was their view.
Right.
And they don't suddenly want to change name and become like everyone else. So that shut us up, really, and it hasn't been reviewed since. And in that process, of course, we have used the name Girl and Bear for our production capability, and that's now a very big, sort of 300 people producing and making and generating content. And we needed to rebadge that because people wouldn't believe that an ad agency could do that as well as an independent production company. So we created an entirely separate entity to create that level of independence, and it needed a name.
Charles, tell the story of, because I think, everybody, a lot of people know it, but the founding story, which was heavily connected to O2.
Yeah, sorry. The only reason it's an interesting story from the point of view of anyone listening or watching is it demonstrates the danger of incumbency. So we were not even really an agency. Me and Rooney were pretty determined to start doing something. And Adrian was very much in that conversation. Priestley was away in Australia.
So this is Ian Priest, Adrian Coleman and Rooney Carruthers, the creative director.
Yeah. And the client at O2, which was still Cellnet in those days, and this is in 2001, had sort of said he's really struggling with his agency to get this launch, this rebrand and relaunch of Cellnet.
Who was that at the time?
Will Harris.
Okay.
Who we'd worked with on Orange at WCS. It's really struggling to get his agency to recognise the scale of the opportunity and realise how to bring this brand to life in a launch campaign. Anyway, as I recall, he sometime like late summer in 2001, I said no. Well, I basically said I've got a day job. So I don't know how I could help. Me and Rooney, Rooney was coming back from Chart Day, I think, on the West Coast. I think it was Chart Day, and so it was too early on. But it was part of Will's. By putting the thought in our head, Will was definitely one of the catalysts for the whole thing to happen. Anyway, we start thinking through, well, actually, I think I was probably 35 at that point. If we're ever going to do it, I'll have to get on with it. That's when we got hold of Adrian, just to see what an account, because neither me or Rooney were account handlers, and we really liked Adrian. He was in the similar sort of frame of mind. Anyway, AMB were given that chance over the autumn because we weren't even ready, and we said no. And had they answered the brief, we would never have ever got a glimpse of O2, and the whole storyline of VCCP would be very different. However, they flunked it again, second time. So this time he phones out in the winter, and it's a much more urgent call. And it's obviously more of an opportunity. It's a concrete, they still haven't done it, we're fucked off. There was another client at this stage, and so it wasn't sort of like talking to an old mate. And so we said, okay, we'll pitch. And there was a direct shootout, which involved an interesting Christmas working stuff up. And we were awarded the account. It was taken out of AMB and we were given the account. Anyway, the reason we won, Gary Holt can tell this story, is Gary Holt and Martin Lambinaire were the two the two designers who came up with the name O2 and the identity of O2, the blue ground with the bubbles, to symbolise digital oxygen, because from their research that it was becoming apparent, even though these things weren't around, that the mobile phone was becoming essential to life, and from essential to life we got to O2. I said, and we just like Rooney ran towards the Wolf Owen's design of orange and the name and using the core colours, although Rooney added the orange out of black, as I recall. Rooney really used, as you might remember, totally immersed himself in the O2 brand world.
With all that DJ Shadow stuff, the music.
DJ Shadow.
Because he knew them, didn't he?
Yeah. And and Gary Holt said, well, it's interesting, he said, because we also, not only did we adopt their identity, we moved into their office. This office was Lambinain's office. We had a tiny little corner on the second floor. We sublet off them. So here you have an agency that's fully adopted the work of the design agency, is based in a small corner of the design agency, completely agnostic as to where design ends, advertising starts, the website finishes, sponsorship, identity, CRM. Just say, let's just produce an O2 brand world, which will have some advertising and lots of other stuff. Apparently, according to Gary, AMV, when him and Martin took them through the O2 identity and recommendations, they went, thank you, we'll take it from here. And never picked up the phone again. And it lost the business, but also lost their way as an agency, because the world has moved on to a very different level of cohesion and integration, because so many platforms exist now. If it was bad enough in 2002, think how fragmented things have become. So the disciplines and the approach that I was talking about that we set up to achieve, cohesive, singular, sure-footed, united communication is now the sort of, I think, recognised to be kind of the only thing that makes sense.
I worked with you on Orange.
Yes.
And O2 was very much Orange Mark II, wasn't it? In so many ways, it got right the things that Orange got wrong.
Yes. In many ways, that what we learned on Orange, Rooney and me in particular, in that case, and you obviously in terms of your involvement on Orange as well. But what absolute clarity of brand vision and positioning, absolute unity of identity, regardless of format, regardless of channel, and a refusal to observe the conventions of the category. Those three things we did apply to O2, but I think I'd apply them to any brand. So it's not like we were doing First Direct, we were doing
ING.
Oh, no, actually, that was here. But Caffrey. But there were a load of brands, Dreamcast. There were a load of brands, Land Rover, BMW. We were applying those principles to them all at WCRX. Camelot. Yeah, that was yes, Camelot. Later on, and so it wasn't. It was a philosophy of how you do it more than Orange, transferring Orange, and obviously that philosophy has moved on quite a long way. But the interesting thing, just on that, is one of the problems Orange had is it believed in a wire-free future where you call people, not places. And it was a brilliant thought, and it's a brilliant line. The future's bright, the future's orange. But it came true. It came true about 6 years after launch. Around about 2000, that we do call people, and we don't call places any longer. We don't call desks. We don't call houses, we call people. Everyone has their own number, which they take with them wherever they go. So it's like, an orange never quite worked out what the next horizon was.
Yeah.
But with digital oxygen, that little glimmer of seeing into the future, I mean, we're still at the very foothills of where that can go. I mean, we just talked about generative AI, but who knows what's next?
Yeah.
And so from an O2 point of view, it's got a lot more to grow into. And in the end, of course, Orange got merged into EE. As a result, I think, because it slightly lost its thought leadership.
Yeah.
Next for me, I'm just going to keep doing what I do. So making communication. That's all I've ever done. I'm obviously competent at it, and I enjoy it. So there's no change for me, in the sense that I find it very rewarding. I'm a useful member of kind of the team here in terms of what I can contribute to the end product. I've never liked theory. I've never liked theory in its own right. It's about turning theory into practice. That's the bit that makes me want to come into work every day, which I do, and I do want to come in. I enjoy it.
You're not a worker from home, are you, at all?
No.
You're really old school.
Yeah, I just find home should be home and work should be work. If I do work from home, I don't work from home. I go to a cafe or somewhere. I struggle to combine the domestic and the work thing. I can, but I don't like to. But so that's me. I'll continue to do it until I'm surplus to requirements. That's because I really enjoy it. The industry.
Do you think there is an industry?
It's a fair point, but I think it's slightly academic in that if you're a communications practitioner, you'll find a nice home for yourself if you're good. It might be at what would have been called an ad agency, it might be a design agency, it might be an in-house, it might be as a marketing director, but coming back to the point we're making at the start, there's a growing demand for good communication. One of the things that always makes me laugh, there is a misapprehension sometimes that the core old-fashioned traditional advertising is in massive decline. In actual fact, even in real terms, it hasn't declined. Probably is still edging up ever so slightly. The amount of money spent globally on traditional advertising. What has happened is that online advertising or digital advertising has overtaken it. But what that means is it's doubled the market. It hasn't taken half of traditional advertising. It's all supplementary, and there's yet more to come on top of that. So it's an era of explosive growth for communications, and yeah, my general advice is stop worrying. In terms of great brand building narratives, I'd say, yeah, we're by no means where we were in the 90s. Particularly if you look at Europe from a European perspective. And
yes, yeah.
There's a lot of inconsistency, a lot of fragmentation, a lot of very pedestrian work being produced. But at the same time, there are great brands being built, whether it's Cadbury or O2 or EasyJet or Guinness or McDonald's or Coca-Cola. That's before you get into all the tech brands and so on and so forth. And they do have storylines and they do cut through. The interesting thing is how many brands choose to observe their standards.
Yes.
And that's a good question. And I think it's to do with it's not easy to behave that way. It's not easy to join all the dots. It's not easy, even if everything's going in your favour, but there's a load of things that aren't going in your favour. So, for instance, a new marketing director, a new owner, a new chief exec, the desire to reinvent the wheel is colossal.
Yes, yeah.
A disruptor means that your whole market's in turmoil. There's any number of reasons why you shouldn't, why building a long-term narrative has become difficult. And
performance marketing is a killer,
performance
isn't it?
is an absolutely massive part of it, yeah, undoubtedly. And people can get wedded to that sort of, it's kind of like a performance-enhancing drug, but ultimately, like all performance-enhancing drug, it wears off. You need more of it to achieve less. And then you realise, oh, fucking hell, everyone's forgotten about brand and we have no mental availability, I have to rebuild the brand again. And quite often then you don't go back to where you were because you don't want to admit how wrong you were. So then you start again, you think, well, that's compounded the problem to some extent. There's lots of factors that can prevent the right decisions being made. And one of the things we find very often is the answer is a rededication to what was working in the first place. Brands very often have the successful formula and then forget it. We live in a world of diminished agency, I think, and there's no reason for that. There's no reason to be fooled by that attitude, to fall for that lie. You can have more agency now than you would have been able to have when I was learning my job in the 80s. It's just that for reasons that are technological, social, cultural, everyone's got more timid of backing themselves and asserting themselves in the sense of making things happen. And there's this phrase, which is a cliche, but you can either have an internal locus of control or an external locus of control. External locus of control, you think the world happens to you, therefore why try that hard? What will be, will be. So you're quite fatalistic. I think a lot of people are like that now. And you get the phrase like the silent majority, they're just sort of waiting for something to happen. The internal locus of control, you think you happen to the world. You think you can influence destiny and you can influence events. And my advice is be a little bit more like that. No one's ever one thing or the other, and sometimes you should coast. But my advice is you can achieve a lot more than you realise if you put your mind to it and you stick to it. And there's lots of people say, "Oh, how can you possibly start a business now?" And you say, "Well, just start one." Is the answer. I know it sounds glib, but what's the worst that can happen? And even if it doesn't work, you'll have learned in order to build the second one how to do it well. And I just feel that's something that sort of has been slightly forgotten about. We live in a strangely, slightly defeatist world, and also, well, you can't do that, you can't say that, you can't think that, you think, no, well, you can, if you want to. And, you can back yourself and make a success of it. Go for it.
Heard it. There's just a magnificent speech by C.S. Lewis at the start of the war, who was, I didn't know this, but he was a vicar.
Right.
Did you know that C.S. Lewis was a vicar? Or a priest,
only very recently someone mentioned, as it may be the same thing. Go on, yeah.
And at the start of the war, he gave this sermon, and obviously I won't be able to remember the quote. Something like, there is basically just no good time ever to do anything if we didn't do things at the really worst of times and mitigated it by saying this is the wrong time to do it. Nothing would ever be done, nothing would ever be written, nothing would ever happen. And it's to your point, there's never a good time to start a business, there's never a good time.
Interestingly, because we started in a mini decline, the dot-com bust, they say, in fact, that's the time to start a business. It's in down times. We only heard about that in retrospect.
Yeah.
A lot of people are being denied or denying themselves the opportunity just to learn. You say the hard way, but it's actually the easy way, because experience is quite an enjoyable thing. But we try and shield ourselves from experience. There's this, people don't even leave voicemails now. And they go, oh, we can get AI to write my emails, but your voice, your real voice and your narrative voice are going to be very similar. So if you delegate that, and then you have to stand up and talk to people, you won't be able to very successfully because you don't really know how you talk. So all these shortcuts are actually long cuts to failure. And I just sometimes think it's not difficult to succeed in the real world if you run towards the real world and test yourself out. You'll get better and better.
The Americans have this attitude really well, I think.
Yeah, I mean they do. I think failure is a word for, is another word for learning, isn't it? You know, in fact, you might learn more from defeat than victory. In fact, you probably do learn more from defeat than victory if you act on it. Obviously, you don't go around failing gratuitously, but you know, there are plenty of high performance spokespeople, athletes, etc., who will talk about the importance of failure and how you respond to it. You know, there's a great Federer fact, but I think he won 80% of his matches, but only won 52% of his points.
Really? No.
Yeah, and because tennis is a really clutch game. I mean, you could actually have won all your matches and won less of your points in tennis, strangely enough. But if you just got murdered on the first two sets and then 1-6, 1-6, 1-6, 1, you'd actually have won less points. I think you could do that. But it's not unusual in actual fact. He just won more percentage of his matches than most. But most elite tennis players only win between 50 and 55% of their points. But there's a lot of failure involved, is my point. And that was his point. He was talking at the commencement day of a university. And if you go around sulking about Federer, the fact that Federer lost basically 50% of every point he ever played didn't bother him.
Yeah.
And he was quite successful. So I found that a very inspiring piece of information, is just how many setbacks he did have.
Yeah.
And of course, that's not the picture he was building.
Yeah.
And it's also about, are you good at what you're doing? You know, that sense of, you know, they say there are three things for someone to be satisfied at work: is autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Okay.
So the purpose is the collective bit. Am I working towards a common goal with my colleagues? And that's very, very inspiring and motivating. The autonomy bit is, am I getting the opportunity to learn and develop and don't feel like I'm simply an automaton? You know, I've got real independence to use my imagination and have some kind of discretion over, and just generally some freedom to say and do what I think. Then the third one, and partly because of autonomy, am I learning to be the best I'll ever be? Am I learning to master this particular craft and skill? And learning to master a craft and skill, there comes a point at which I think, I am actually fucking good at this. I've learned from Hegarty, I've learned from Bogle, I've learned from Rooney, I've learned from who else have I learned from? I'm just thinking in terms of all the names I named.
Yeah.
So I'll then have to remember to name a few more. I mean, you know, Gary Holt, Doug Hamilton. There's loads of people who I've seen in action. Think, you know, there's so much I'm learning here, and I'm very lucky. But that comes back to my point about agency. You make a lot of your own luck. You have to turn up when you don't want to turn up. You've got to be in the room when you don't want to be in the room.
Yeah.
If you're there, you will learn. If you're not, you won't. And you can think yourself out and talk yourself out of loads of stuff, as you were saying. That's the C.S. Lewis point, isn't it?
Yeah.
only by doing stuff and chancing your arm will you create your own luck.
Yeah.
And that's virtually, well, anyone we talked to in our book, they all thought they were lucky.
Yes.
And that's because they kept having a go, despite actually having lots of setbacks.
Yeah,
so the two people we worked most closely with, and had a big part in as a catalyst for VCCP were Will Harris and Kent Thexton, who worked at. They both worked for the central part of what was then MMO2, along with Shardy, along with Susie. And Katie, and so it's just sort of it's when you can't see your mind back such a long time, but it was quite formative years. So anyway, so I just wanted to sort of call them out, and then even now, many of our clients that we work with don't necessarily have links directly back to the early days, but it's amazing how people resurface in new roles, or you get a reference from someone and you can, even 20 years in, you can still see the original kind of connections and interactions that have led to your success, and that's sort of kind of, I suppose it's true of any success story. You can always piece together the constituent parts, but I suppose it's a way of saying, always recognise who you are indebted to, and acknowledge it and appreciate it, and actually, in a roundabout way, I think it opens you up to the next round of opportunities. So I'm a great believer in sort of being very conscious of counting your blessings and being grateful for everyone who's been a part of your personal success. And I don't even think it's necessarily that altruistic. I think there's a degree to which you actually the act of gratitude is in itself a constructive instinct.
Charles Vallance, thank you very much.
No, my pleasure.